The renewed battle over mask mandates is fueling more division on Capitol Hill, as if that were possible. With a group of House Republicans and their staffers marching maskless to the Senate floor yesterday, refusing to comply with a new rule requiring that everyone wear masks in the lower chamber. Texas Congressman Chip Roy was among the protesters. He joins us now. So what's it like there today?
Hey, Dana, how are you? Great to be on the show. Hey, look, I mean, we're here doing our job. We're trying to send a signal to the American people that they don't need to be running around in fear. We're able to make up our own minds, our own decisions. I mean, look, Dana, I am pro-vaccine. My father had polio. He's a polio survivor. I believe in vaccines, but I also believe in healthcare freedom. You know, when I've gone in to meet with people who are vulnerable, gone to nursing homes, met with veterans, I've masked up. But at the bottom line is, we've got the power of the Speaker of the House being used to say they're going to arrest staffers, arrest the people who work for us because they're exercising their judgment, which the powers that be have been saying that if you get vaccinated, you're all safe. And my staff, they're saying, oh, you've got to come in here, you've got to follow these orders or we're going to arrest you. I've got a real problem with that. And we're sending a signal to the American people that they should be in fear. And the American people want to go back to work. They want their kids back in school. And they want to be able to make decisions for their own well-being and not have the federal government step in and tell them what they have to do. That's not American.
I hear you on that. I just want to point out that Speaker Pelosi spokesperson Drew Hamill told Fox News here that the Speaker of the House does not control the U.S. Capitol Police, and we were unaware of the memo until it was reported in the press. So we'll say, hopefully nobody's going to get arrested.
Yeah, but Dana, that's absurd though. Like, we met with the Capitol attending physician the other day, and he put out, in his orders talking about what we should do with masks. He put out information out there saying that we have to be masked up. We know that Speaker Pelosi is in communication with him. In fact, he sent the memo to them to start with. So when she says Capitol Police, they're doing that on their own. Capitol Police doesn't want to arrest anybody. But then you have Capitol Police put out a memo yesterday clarifying, and what they said was, well, sorry, you're still going to have to follow the orders of police to put your mask on when you come in. Look, that's what the American people don't want to see anymore, is this kind of tyrannical behavior by the people who are running our institutions. We have a duty to lead, and leading isn't having us on the floor of the House of Representatives masked up while we've got data that doesn't even back it up.
Well,
do you know how many deaths there have been?
Yeah, you make a good point when you said we've got a crisis at the border. We're playing footsie with mask mandates in the people's house. Help us understand as to why migrants can walk across the border, and we don't know if they're COVID-19 or not. Are they getting appropriately tested now?
Well, they're not. This is a great point, Bill, and I appreciate it. Here in D.C., when they're now going back to masks, when they lifted the mask mandate, there was only 90 people in the hospital. Today, there's 27, right? That's what they're doing. We've had 2 deaths in the last 2 weeks. There's been more murders in D.C. Meanwhile, on our border, in La Jolla, Texas, we have hundreds of people being put into a hotel in La Jolla by Catholic Charities who we know to be COVID positive. We have 90 Border Patrol agents who have tested positive because of the influx of people coming across the border. Just yesterday, I got a text from a Border Patrol agent who I meet with all the time when I go to the border, who said that they had 500 people they had just had come across the border the day before. They are overrun, they are inundated, and there's a massive spike and surge in COVID positive individuals, and we could stop that today with Title 42 implementation. That's why I have a discharge petition at the desk on the House floor to require that the Biden administration follow Title 42 requirements to protect the American people from COVID positive individuals coming into the United States. Common sense, they won't do it. That's the Biden administration.
Did you see yesterday, Congressman, that the Texas Democrats who are hiding out there in D.C., many of them tested positive for COVID, and apparently we're spreading it around to a couple of people that we know at least that have been revealed. They were back on Capitol Hill yesterday.
Well, and in fact, they were in the Oversight Committee. I had the pleasure of, asking questions to several of my Texas Democrat colleagues about the fact that they have fled Texas to come to Washington, D.C. to ask Washington to step over the voting interests and the voting rights of the people of Texas. And they're coming here and getting on charter planes. I don't fly on charter planes to fly up to D.C. and to hang out and avoid their constitutional and legal responsibility to represent Texans in the Texas legislature. I don't know why that the COVID has been spreading around Democratic circles. I wish them well, and I hope that they're healthy, but it's kind of interesting. I know that Nancy Pelosi's office has had a bunch of positives as well since the Texas Democrats have come up here with their stunt.
They're still there. I'm going to squeeze this in. Here's the police memo. Officers should not arrest any member for failure to wear a mask or to comply with the mask mandate. If a visitor or staff member fails to wear a mask after a request is made to do so, the visitor or staff shall be denied entry to the House office buildings or House side of the U.S. Capitol. Two more things. Thomas Massie, Republican from Kentucky yesterday. He's been fined for not wearing a mask. I don't know if he's gotten the vaccine or not. At one point, I don't think he was vaccinated. We asked him yesterday he's going to back down. He said, hell no, I won't back down. The day before, Nancy Pelosi called Kevin McCarthy a moron. What's going on up there about the descending level of respect between members of Congress?
Well, in order to have respect, you actually have to respect the disagreements that you can have among each other. I stand with Thomas Massie. Look, I'm not going to tell anybody whether I've been vaccinated or not because it's none of their damn business. And so that's my position. That's Thomas's position. I'm standing with my staff. I'm telling my staff to do what they think is in their best interest, and I will back them up. And if Nancy Pelosi wants to come after my staff, she's going to have to come through me. This is not the way we conduct business here. We can agree to disagree, but this is a line in the sand. We're a free country, and I'm going to act like it. I'm going to defend the freedom of Americans and my staff to do what they think is in their interest, not the will of Nancy Pelosi.
Okay. Chip Roy, thank you, sir.
Thank you.